So it's, as you'd imagine, a very complicated document. Often, we're, as councillors, having to break that down a little bit for residents in sort of bite-sized chunks. Part of the challenge we have is meeting our housing targets and also trying to maintain that sort of suburban, pleasant, green feel for the rest of the borough that our residents know and love. We believe in community politics, and this is community politics done in a way that delivers homes, not in a way that I think the government sees it, in it almost as a dirty word. I think the government sees it as something that stops development, whereas actually, in our experience, it delivers homes, and it delivers homes in the right way.
Hello, I'm Toby Fox from 1.5 million new homes, the Local Government Challenge, sponsored by Redloft and by Lovell. So we're visiting a different council every month, and we're looking at what works and what needs to change to get more homes built. And this month we're in the London Borough of Sutton, and I'm going to meet Cllr Jake, who is the chair of the Housing, Economy and Business Committee. So Jake, tell me a little bit about how the local plan works in Sutton and how effective you feel that is as a way of getting the community engaged in the process of change.
Yeah. So it's, as you'd imagine, a very complicated document. Often, we're, as councillors, having to break that down a little bit for residents in sort of bite-sized chunks.
Because it's quite technical.
It's technical, it's often very dense, it's that thick.
Yeah.
And with all the appendices, that gets even bigger. But we see the local plan really as the linchpin of controlling development in the borough. You've been around the area presumably a little bit. You've seen that there is a real mix of suburban charm to a lot of it, as well as some taller buildings in our district centres, particularly Sutton Town Centre. And part of the challenge we have is meeting our housing targets and also trying to maintain that sort of suburban, pleasant, green feel for the rest of the borough that our residents know and love. And want to keep. A lot of our residents, they own their own homes, they've lived here all their lives, and change is hard.
Yeah.
So part of our local plan process is walking our residents through, this is what the government needs us to do, this is the challenge we've got to make sure that, our 1,000 households in temporary accommodation, we've got a plan to get them into permanent housing. And this is how we want to do it whilst, preserving what makes Sutton a green and pleasant place to live. And we do that through taller building in our town centre, in Sutton Town Centre particularly, because that's got the best public transport links. The rest of the borough can be a little bit hit and miss at points. And
we're not on the tube line now.
No, precisely. We're one of the few boroughs that's not on the tube line. What we do have, going to our credit, is a pretty decent national rail infrastructure. Whether that could be expanded to include a metro-style service from TfL is another matter.
Yeah.
And that would be a key to help us unlock further growth, further development. But for now, because of those constraints around us, that does mean that we need to have a bit of a pragmatic view on. We can't just say yes to everything. We can't just say no to everything either. So that's why at appeals, Sutton Council does a very good job. Our appeal success rate is on the higher end because we come to sound decisions as a council and then we defend them robustly.
Great stuff. Now, that just going back to that local plan, how would you like to see that process and maybe that document itself improved or changed in a way that would make it easier for you to bring the communities along with you on this journey of getting more homes built?
So I think part of it is a jargon buster.
Yeah.
A lot of our plans have been getting very good actually at putting those kinds of glossaries, jargon busters in there and explaining things in plain English and easy read formats, so they're becoming a lot more accessible and a lot more sort of the standard. And our team have responded really appropriately to that with our next iteration of the local plan, because we are reviewing it at the minute.
Yeah.
So all of that will sort of come to a head, and it will be a lot easier to understand than perhaps some other planning documents might be that you might see elsewhere in the country.
And what's the timeline for the local plan?
So that's still very much up in the air, up for discussion. We're not sort of settled on a firm timeline as of yet, but we are keeping everything under review. And we are still looking at some sort of extraneous pieces of work to do with it that need to be completed before we can sort of commit to, right, this is when we'll go to consultation on it. But we have done our issues and options consultation previously. So some of the broad themes are already out there in the public domain at the minute.
Correct.
But as I say, with all the changes to national planning policy, we need to take a bit of a moment to sort of digest what's come from national government and perhaps reflect on what that means for our local plan, as well as some of the things like the hot button issues like housing targets, for instance. That's always a perennial topic for discussion. We've incidentally always hit our housing target here in Sutton, so whatever target we set, we do intend to hit it. But obviously national changes do mean that we need to think about where we lie on that spectrum again.
But it's interesting, isn't it? There's chicken and egg here, because you can't really deliver a local plan until you know the national circumstances you're doing that in, the context. But the government is absolutely mustard keen for you to be delivering new homes as quickly as possible and to those accelerated targets. So you're sort of between a rock and a hard place.
It's certainly a difficult balancing act. I think that's how I'd put it. What I would say, I am a little bit concerned about some of the pace with which the government is going at. I completely understand, the background to it, because we are in a housing crisis. But the way our local plan and our planning process is set up, particularly in Sutton, where we've got lots of very keen and active residents groups and residents in general, is very collaborative. It's very much a discursive process. The way that the government are really imposing some of these top-down targets is going to come at a bit of attention with that. So I think we will find ourselves somewhere in the middle between the two. And all I would say really is, to the government in particular, if they're listening, we've got a formula here that is working, that is delivering homes. Don't basically let us get on with it to some degree. I understand the rationale to push us to deliver more and push councils to deliver more. That's absolutely reasonable. I understand that. But when we push back, understand that's coming from a place of knowing how to get things done.
And how do you know how to get things done? What do you do differently here than other councils might do in your sort of understanding and experience in terms of getting the community behind you, getting people to support what you're doing?
And I'm going to be slightly political with my answer.
Sure.
As a good Liberal Democrat, I genuinely believe in empowering the community to have their say. So we make extensive use of our councillors going out there talking to people about applications coming up in their area, getting people's views, and being there to really be a conduit for them. Whether that means things coming to planning committee and having a full and proper hearing, or if the council is delivering something, ward councillors are involved very early on to make sure that niggles in terms of where the parking should go, where the balconies should go, that kind of stuff gets ironed out before it gets to planning in the first place. And that is a uniquely Liberal Democrat thing to do, I must say. We believe in community politics, and this is community politics done in a way that delivers homes, not in a way that I think the government sees it almost as a dirty word. I think the government sees it as something that stops development, whereas actually, in our experience, it delivers homes, and it delivers homes in the right way.
Well, let me challenge it, if you will. So the challenge would be, it's slowing everything down, because you go back and you go back and you go back, talking to people again and again and again about what they want and what they don't want. In the meantime, nothing's getting built. Isn't there a quicker way of doing it?
I think there certainly is a quicker way of doing it. My concern with the quicker way of doing it is that it would then sort of lead to community distrust. I'm not sort of knocking those who think that going faster, further all the time is necessarily a bad thing. But in this particularly when it comes to local neighbourhood planning, there are very few issues like it that get people angry. So I think it is worth the time. And yes, it might seem like it might take a little longer to get to the desired outcome, but you do get there in the end. And we're looking at the proof of it here. Councillors were involved with the early discussions on this scheme very early on, and it's resulted in a scheme that is now delivering homes for people. And we're seeing it across the borough as some of the other schemes we're coming forward with as well. Whether developers have the time and patience for that, I appreciate that may not be as as the case for private developers as it is for the council. So there is a balancing act. And I think that's where the pre-application process that we as a council have, and lots of councils have got these now, is a really important service. So if there's one thing that private developers take away from it, from anything that we're talking about, is do use those pre-application services, because they are a good way to get some of that initial feedback and get maybe some tweaks before it gets to a point where it might then lead to problems and then slow things down.
Jake, thank you very much indeed for your part in bringing 1.5 million new homes forward.
One home at a time.
So that's it for another episode of 1.5 million new homes, the local government challenge, sponsored by Redloft and by Lovell. So we're going to be back in a couple of days with more from the London Borough of Sutton. But until then, if you like what you've heard, please click like and subscribe, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.